quadratic equation. W squared minus W minus 30 equals 0. First step is always to get 0 by itself in a quadratic equation. Rather than when you're dealing with lines, you want to isolate the variable and get the variable by itself. And here we're going to isolate the variable by the end also, but we need to use something called the zero product property. So our big goal is to get 0 by itself so that way we can eventually say AB equals 0 implies A equals 0 or B equals 0. This is famously called the zero product property. Okay, so W squared minus W minus 30 is quadratic, and in order to get it into two things multiplying to 0, we're going to need to factor it. So I'll use the X method that we've been practicing in class and ask, well, what's my adding number and what's my multiplying number? The adding number is the coefficient to the W to the linear term, which is a -1, and the multiplying number is the product of the A and the C, the number in front of W squared, which is 1, and the constant at the end, which is -30. So that would be -30. Can you think of two numbers that add to -1 and multiply to -30? Pause for a second, see if you can find them on your own. But assuming you gave it a good shot here, the numbers would be -6 and 5, if I'm not mistaken. -6 times 5 is -30. -6 plus 5, that's -1. So we have a factoring over here of the two numbers we found, W minus 6 and W plus 5. And that's going to be equal to 0. So the zero product property now allows us to say W minus 6 equals 0 or W plus 5 equals 0, from which we can isolate our variables and say W equals 6 or W equals -5. So generally, although not always, with these types of expression or equations, you'll get two answers because of the power. You can think of it as being related to the power on the quadratic. So, pause the video and try this one on your own. Assuming you gave it a shot and tried it on your own, your solution should be, well, we need an adding number of -4, a multiplying number of +4. The two numbers that do this would be -2 and -2. So the factoring would become y minus 2 equals 0, which would mean that by the zero product property, y minus 2 equals 0 or y minus 2 equals 0. It's the same expression, right, or same equation, which means that y would only be equal to 2. So just like I said on the last slide, although oftentimes quadratics give you two solutions, here's an example where you only get one solution. And later on in the class, we'll see examples where you get no solutions and imagine